In this episode, I'm going to discuss supply chain control towers with Aborn's director, Stephen Aborn. We're going to examine what they are, what type of capabilities they bring to an operations team, and then what the differences are between a SaaS approach and a control tower approach to transportation. So I'll bring in Steve. Steve, how's it going?
Good, Kyle. How you doing?
Good, as always. Always fun living in this quarantine life and experiencing working from home. But yes, let's start off. Don't know why I just brought you full, but let's start off real quick with how would you define a supply chain control tower?
Sure. I think a supply chain control tower, especially in transportation, the industry that we work in, is really taking a 360-degree view of all of your operations. So, sometimes we run into prospects or other companies that, reach out to us and potentially they have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different up to 35 different carriers or service providers that they use to execute shipments on a day-to-day basis. And sometimes what we find is that all of those carriers, all of those processes are really managed in a silo. So potentially they're managed by people. They could be managed through a spreadsheet, some kind of TMS light operation. So they don't really have a 360 view of what's going on. Whereas in a supply chain, transportation control tower, you are planning, executing, measuring every single thing that's going on within that operation.
So I think one of the things, especially I was getting kind of caught up with my research of a supply chain control tower, is the differences between that and visibility. Because when you talk view, kind of the big buzzword right now is visibility and having full
Mhm.
visibility. Where's the big difference between control tower and visibility?
Yeah, sure. I think visibility is a component, right? So visibility is a piece, just like those individual carriers or service providers, brokers, other folks that you use. Those are all pieces of your operation, just like visibility is a piece. So visibility to us is really understanding, where that truck is, where your goods are in transit. So you can understand, it's like that parcel experience that we've talked about in the past. This is when my good picked up. Here's where it is on the road. Here's an expected delivery. I think the control tower, takes that data, takes that, component of visibility and provides some action to it. So, if you're in a control tower approach with, and let's say a shipment's moving late, right? So something either didn't get picked up or is running late. That control tower has the ability to flag that, potentially push that to the right person, like, hey, operator, look at this. Or, in what we've been hearing more and more about is, through things like artificial intelligence, the next step really is, hey, that shipment's running late. Let me execute, right? So that at that point, the computer is taking the data from, a visibility solution, analyzing it, and then potentially, doing some operating activity against it.
So is and forgive my ignorance, but is a control tower is it a piece of software or what, is it
Mhm.
more so it is a piece of software?
Yeah, it could be a software or a software and a service combined, right? So if you think about kind of how we work with clients, we are their control tower. So we have a TMS which has visibility, integration. So we have whether it's EDI, API, other service software, integrations into that system. So it's really the whole package. So whether you have a computer system that's kind of managing it or a blend of computer systems and people and process together, it's really that comprehensive. They call it a control tower because you're really in control of every single moving piece within that within the operation.
And that's something I want to kind of come back to a little bit later in this interview, is sort of what that different kind of more unique approach Aborn's taking to this. But in the meantime, kind of like going a little further back, like kind of back to the beginning. But so you talked a little bit about the sort of operations, but talk to me about what type of operation or like operational functionality a control tower will provide an ops team. So what exactly is it helping with ops wise if you're using it?
Sure. I think the first thing's probably labor and time. So if you're in that kind of all-encompassing control tower environment, you're probably not having people in labor go out and solicit rates from carriers, right? You're probably not having people in labor tender to carriers, track to carriers. So you have some kind of a system. For us, it's a TMS, right? So you have that TMS, and the TMS is getting your rates in an automated fashion, making tenders in an automated fashion, tracking in an automated fashion. So I think really the one of the key differences is the labor. So if I'm an organization, we hear pretty frequently that different organizations might have 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 different people doing those activities on a day-to-day basis. I mean, that's a lot of time and a lot of salary for any organization. So if they're able to, put process and put computer processes and have a control tower approach that automates that, that's potentially, 10 people with X amount of hours back in their day that they can repurpose to do something more strategic.
Makes tons of sense. Like it's the you're blending sort of that idea of like for the most part, an ops team kind of works as a control tower, but a
Yep.
control tower approach is bringing the technology and bringing that to the ops team, more or
Yep.
less.
Yeah, exactly. And I
What
think one of the things that that we heard a lot about recently with COVID, right, was companies that did have this kind of control tower approach where they had all of their information centralized in one place. They were able to spot trends. They were able to see what was happening and have data around it and react much quicker than other organizations. So, for example, one of the first things that we started reporting on at the beginning was kind of tender rejection. So and this is a little bit of a control tower approach, right? We start seeing tender rejections elevate. So we start reaching out, finding more carriers to move that freight. Potentially, and we started doing that across all of our clients, right? So we started seeing it kind of localized to a few carriers, and then as it started to grow, we said, "Oh boy, we better get a plan in place." Broadly for all of our customers, so that they can move freight. Especially where we work in the food and beverage world, that was crazy in March and into April and May, right? So that those goods needed to be moved. That freight had to be moved, and so it just gave us the ability to see a trend and react to a trend a lot quicker. And that's a lot of what you hear is the companies that were the most successful throughout COVID in terms of managing their supply chain were using kind of a control tower approach. So they had a ton of data, they had the ability to operate, and they knew what was going on, and they were able to react really quickly.
what other type of analytical insights does it provide? What else can they kind of see? Not in this kind of adjusting to the mercy of the market, right? Something that helps you be proactive. What other kind of everyday analytical insights does it provide?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think really you can provide reporting and analytics on anything that's happening, right? So as we talked about at the beginning, this is a comprehensive, holistic approach. So in theory, you're establishing digital connections and digital ways to transfer information with all of your partners. So carrier information, potentially your warehousing and 3PL information could be fed into that control tower. So you can start to get, inventory information potentially. That was a big thing during COVID, right? Is managing stock levels and managing inventory levels. So once you're in that digital kind of control tower environment, you can start to tie together a bunch of different supply chain silos. So you can tie transportation to warehousing, warehousing to inventory, inventory to forecasting, forecasting to buying, and you just start to tie all of that together and tell a story.
So all those functions you talk about, I've seen them offered as just software as a service or SaaS.
Yep.
So what's the difference between an organization kind of just piecemealing the different SaaS platforms that are out there, and using a control tower approach? Is there a big difference with this, or what's happening?
I think if you do it in the right way, it's almost two different ways of skinning the same cat. You could have a transportation management, system or provider, right? You could have, kind of a similar suite of services around your warehouse. Um, and you could, use data, and you could use the ability to integrate to start to bubble that up and tell stories and make decisions. I mean, the other way to do it is and you see this a lot more with like Fortune 100 companies, right? Is they have huge budgets, they make a ton of money, billions of dollars a year, and they're able to reinvest and buy, really, really expensive, pieces of software, like, some of the SAP services or Oracle services,
Right.
where, they're doing everything from CRM to, manufacturing, to transportation, to warehousing, to inventory, and all of that, is really pulled together in a comprehensive ERP through one service provider. But I mean, when you're going down those paths, you're looking at years and years of implementation and tens of millions of dollars in cost. So I think for other companies that are looking to pull something together similarly so that they can compete against those Fortune 100 companies, you kind of got to be scrappy in the way that you pull it together.
Yeah, so it's almost kind of taking the Fortune 100 approach, but putting it into an environment that you can actually afford, more
Yeah,
or less.
right. Yep.
So one interesting thing I've definitely run into, and you were speaking to it earlier, but is at Aborn you've created sort of a hybrid approach to this, kind of blending like 4PL services with a control tower kind of capabilities. Talk a little bit about that. What exactly is Aborn kind of doing that's a little different within the control tower approach world?
Yeah, sure. I think the distinction that you're talking about here is almost like software versus a combination of software and a service, right?
Correct.
So it's not, we aren't a software company. Software is part of, what we do, right? So TMS would be kind of the main software that we work in on a daily basis. So what we do is, in order to get the most out of that software and in order to provide a great customer service and a great experience to our customers, is we support that software with different functionalities, right? So we have a load planning team who's kind of managing the order fulfillment cycle. So the time from when an order drops to when it's delivered. We have an account management team. What they're doing is really kind of managing that relationship, providing insights, getting feedback, fixing broken processes. The data team, the data engineering and data analytics team on the back end. They're pulling all of the information out of that TMS, out of that control tower. So all the different behaviors that are happening, they're pulling that information out and then reporting on it. So they're building dashboards, both externally and internally, so that we can make the right decisions and understand those trends. Kind of as we were talking about, going back to that March, COVID environment. We're pulling data out. Our analysts are looking at it. Our operations folks are looking at it, and then we're able to react.
So if someone has this kind of, if Aborn's handling their kind of freight and the whole managed service, why is it important for the ops team of a company to have control tower capabilities?
From a transportation perspective, I think we are that control tower for them. So, if you think about the kind of use case that we were talking about earlier, where potentially you have 5 different people that are kind of managing different parts of the transportation process. If you use someone like us, you're able to get a much more automated, robust service, a lot more insights, a lot more consolidation, right? So as opposed to working across maybe 35 different service providers, you get to work with one who on your behalf works with 35 different service providers. What it does is it allows you to kind of repurpose your people, right? You get them in positions that are probably a little bit more fulfilling than chasing freight carriers for updates on where a shipment is. So let's use technology systems and backup support structures that we have and we've built out internally to manage those processes for you, so that you can go out and figure out how much inventory you have, or if you should every company that we talk to has a list of 5 or 10 projects that they wish they could be working on, right? So I think it allows you to repurpose your team so that they can go be effective in different places.
Essentially what you hired them for. You don't hire people to work in the spot market. You don't hire people to do this. So having that type of capability just allows them to be more strategic and for you to kind of get the leg up on your competition.
Right. No, that's exactly right. I think what we say in our sales process sometimes is, we do what we do so that you can do what you do, right? If you're a food manufacturer, you need to you need to find suppliers, you need to maintain difficult customer relationships, you need to work on your inventory and your forecasting. You don't necessarily need to operate a robust transportation program, right? Like you could turn to a partner like us and get in a lot of cases pretty significant upgrades from a technical perspective, from an integrations perspective, from a data and reporting perspective, in one solution, so that you can kind of go out and do the work that you do need to do.
Fantastic. Steve, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
If the audience wants to get in contact with you, what's the best way? Where should they reach out to you?
Sure. LinkedIn's probably pretty easy. I think it's just LinkedIn and then Stephen Aborn for the URL. So search me on LinkedIn, Google search, LinkedIn search, or you can find me on the website.
Yeah, I'll make sure to include all the links in the show notes and whatnot. So Steve, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, bye.
Bye, guys.
And that's our show. Have a question about Supply Chain Control Tower that we didn't get to? Leave a comment and we'll be sure to get to it right away. In the meantime, subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching Consulting Logistics. I'm Kyle MacNaught. Rock and roll.